What if I told you your most expensive employees aren't your executives? They're the ones who've actually mentally checked out, mentally quit, but are still on the payroll. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon, leaders. I'm David Pettrone Swalve, founder of Authentara and author of Pirate Jokes Aren't Funny. I want to make sure that we have some quick engagement to get started. So if you would, please type yes in the chat if you've ever managed or worked alongside someone who was physically present but mentally checked out. Well, I'm certain, and as I can see by the responses coming in, that, well, that those who are watching the recording and maybe even listening to the audio, that this question itself consistently resonates because I think it's something we've all experienced. Today, we're exposing the most expensive workforce you didn't even know you were funding, the ghost workforce. These are employees who show up, log in, attend meetings, but they are checked out mentally. They're physically present, but emotionally gone. And according to Gallup's latest research, they're costing you 30 to 40% of their salary in lost productivity. For a 500 employee organization, that's potentially $2.88 million annually. And that's bleeding from your culture while you're sitting in meetings alone. This week is week 2 of our Toxic Boss Cost Calculator series. We're putting real numbers on leadership failures that most organizations ignore. Last week, we covered turnover costs. Today, it's the silent killer that's harder to spot, but just as expensive to ignore. So this is like our second week of a financial autopsy. We're systemically dissecting the hidden cost of toxic leadership using our proprietary formula, what I like to call our leadership profit leak detector. Let me briefly recap our 5-week journey. You see it there on the right. Last week, week 1, we really explored turnover cost, the $6 million that's walking out your door. We exposed how poor leadership creates a revolving door, costing mid-sized organizations anywhere from $6 to $12 million annually in replacement costs and lost knowledge. Today, we're looking at disengagement costs, that ghost workforce, and we're revealing how disengaged employees become invisible profit drains, physically present but mentally absent, costing organizations, like I said, 34 to 40% of their salary. Next week, we look at productivity loss, that efficiency illusion, where we'll uncover how busy teams can actually be ineffective teams. Then we're going to look at innovation costs. That's the fear tax of creativity. We'll calculate how the lack of psychological safety silences your best ideas. And then we'll look at reputation costs. That's the talent repellent that is unfortunately pretty effective. We'll quantify how toxic leadership creates hiring delays and premium costs when your company becomes known as a great place for good people to avoid. But today, in the next 20 minutes, you're going to learn a few things. First, a straightforward formula to calculate your exact disengagement cost, how to identify the 3 early signs of disengagement. We're going to look at the trust-based transparency framework that helps to stop this bleeding. And one practice is going to be given to you that you can implement immediately after this webinar to allow you to go ahead and put in some true practice on becoming more of an authentic leader. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, you can catch last week's turnover analysis on our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to that. But today stands entirely on its own. Let's go ahead and get started exploring what employee engagement looks like in today's quantum workforce era. The engagement challenge has always existed. What we know is that it's changed dramatically over, well, the past 8 years. Let's take a look at some of the evolution. Prior to 2019, we had the traditional office with mixed levels of engagement. Disengagement was at least observable. They weren't there, or you could see who checked out. You could notice the nonverbal cues. You could observe participation patterns, and body language told the story. According to Gallup's research, even then, roughly 18% of employees were actively disengaged, with another 60% simply going through motions, present, but not truly or fully engaged. Then became 2020 and 2022, right? From that point, we saw everything shift. It became a Zoom grid. Engagement became the so-so kind of anxious online. As we navigated the pandemic, we saw that some cameras stayed off entirely and the signals changed. Digital participation became the new body language, but we really didn't know how to measure it, and there really wasn't a shared experience. And then in 2025, we find ourselves living in the quantum workforce era. We're living in hybrid chaos, some remote, some in person, and the most dangerous shift, well, it's the engagement has become virtually invisible. Disengaged employees can look perfectly present on camera while maintaining a mental checkout perspective. They can attend in-person meetings while contributing nothing, and the warning signs are harder to spot, harder to measure, and therefore more expensive to ignore. This evolution hasn't created disengagement. It's just made it harder to detect while making it easier to hide. And that's why the ghost workforce is draining organizations at unprecedented rates. The drivers haven't changed. 70% of engagement variance still ties to managers. And that direct relationship of the manager to the workforce really decides our own ability to see and address disengagement that has fundamentally transformed the workplace. Let's put some real numbers to this challenge using evidence-based research. The disengagement cost formula is straightforward but often overlooked. Disengagement is simply the number of disengaged employees times your average salary times the disengagement factor. Well, this isn't speculative, it's grounded in longitudinal research. Gallup studies consistently show that disengaged employees cost between 34 and 40%, as we've mentioned, of their salary annually. And that is just through the measurable impacts. What we also know is that you get things like reduced output quality there on the right-hand side. You get higher absenteeism and you get more safety incidents. You have measurable decline in customer satisfaction metrics, and it's been documented that the drag effect impacts your team's performance. So let's just apply this realistic scenario there on the left-hand side. Let's just say you have a 500 employee organization with industry average disengagement rates. And what I've tried to do is use very low, very conservative numbers. So let's just say that 20% of your workforce is actively disengaged, which means that that's 100 employees if you have 500 employees. And their average salary is $80,000. You know what the average is, with a 36% disengagement factor, which is the lower end of research range. So you can see the simple math: 100 times 80,000 times 0.36 equals $2.88 million of annual loss. And that's quietly draining from your organization every year with conservative amounts. What makes this particularly challenging is the compounding effect. Unlike turnover, where cost is immediate but finite, disengagement costs accumulate year after year after year. A single disengaged employee making $80,000 costs approximately $28,800 annually for as long as they remain disengaged. So what we have to understand is what and how is our workforce disengaged? For a fact is that time for some unpredictable truth is what you see on the screen. Disengagement isn't a workforce problem, it's a leadership mirror. Your ghost workforce isn't checking out because they're entitled. They're checking out because they see a gap between your words and your priorities. The data is brutally clear on this. As we mentioned previously, the Gallup isolated what drives engagement variance, and 70% of it is tied directly to the manager relationship, not to benefits, not to office perks, but to relationships. Your highest performers aren't disengaging because they lack motivation. They're disengaging because they've lost trust in leadership. They've lost trust in leadership because they say one thing and they do another. So let me give you 3 early warning signs that your leadership is creating a ghost workforce. First, contribution drop off. When team members who used to speak up in meetings go silent, it's not sudden shyness, it's strategic withdrawal. They're protecting their energy because they no longer believe speaking up actually matters. Second, they're declining volunteering in your organization. When people stop raising their hands for new projects or opportunities, they have lost ambition. They've lost faith that their extra effort will not be valued or recognized. And a third sign is minimalist communication. When detailed updates become brief confirmations, when rich content becomes bare compliance, you're witnessing the early stages of checking out while still collecting a paycheck. Your people aren't fooled by performance. They're exhausted by it. And the ones who check out first, those are the ones who are often your most brilliant minds who simply refuse to pretend anymore. This isn't about generational differences or remote work challenges. It's about the fundamental disconnect between what leaders claim to value and what their calendars, budgets, and promotions actually prove they value. The question isn't whether your workforce is engaged. The question is whether your leadership has learned and earned their engagement. Let me introduce you to trust-based transparency, trust-built transparency, one of the 4 core attributes in the Authentara blueprint that directly addresses your ghost workforce challenge. At its core, trust-built transparency is the deliberate practice of honest communication. It helps to build psychological safety through consistency rather than convenience. And it's really not about sharing everything. It's about ensuring what you do share is real. Let me introduce you here at you see on the screen. At its essence, right, what we know is that it's not about oversharing with radical candor. When implemented, organizations can leverage trust-built transparency fundamentally to transform 3 critical systems. The first problem, as I alluded to before, which is the silent meetings, where crucial issues remain unaddressed. Our solution is a 3-question reveal, which helps to create spaces for truth and process the information that can be risky. When leaders consistently ask, what are we missing? What's not said? What would make this decision better? Teams stop performing engagement and they start practicing it. That's trust-built transparency if we truly care about their input. Problem 2 that trust-built transparency can address the expectation gap, where ambiguity breeds disengagement. Our solution is success mapping. It provides visual clarity about what success looks like. Then it gives people a map to be able to follow, not as micromanagement, but as the freedom that comes from knowing exactly what matters and why. The third problem that trust-built transparency addresses is that trust erosion cycle where words and actions diverge. Our solution is the decision transcript, which makes the why behind the decisions transparent, connecting actions to stated values in real time. What makes the difference here is building leadership with the attribute of trust-built transparency as a transformative piece. As you can see in the left-hand corner, it's one of the 4 primary attributes of our blueprint. Inner clarity gives you the self-awareness to know what's true. Equitable insight ensures you're considering perspectives beyond your own, and guiding principles anchor your transparency in consistent values. Organizations that implement trust-built transparency see measurable shifts. Problems surface earlier, cross-functional collaboration improves, and most importantly, the ghost workforce stops being that thing that people can't see and drains your organization. This isn't about being everyone's friend. It's about being trustworthy enough that people choose to engage again. Here's a specific practice that you can start implementing, well, tomorrow morning if you want. I've listed it with Monday through Friday, an easy 1 through 5. And we call this the Stay Signal Suite. Here's your tasks. On Monday or day 1, identify your signals. What that means is take 10 minutes to list 3 team members whose engagement patterns have changed. Each person, write down one specific behavior shift you've observed. Used in the first meeting in meetings, what you want to understand is, hey, maybe this person's emails have gone from detailed to minimal, and maybe the person used to speak out. Number 2, step 2, let's call it Tuesday. Schedule the container. Send a brief message that creates safety. It says, I'd like to catch up for 20 minutes this week. Not about anything specific as the project goes, just to check in on how things are going for you. Book a private space, no interruptions. Step 3, run the conversation. Open with this, almost this exact same script. I've noticed, name the behavior. I'm curious about what's happening, not to fix or judge, but to understand. Then practice 7 seconds of silence, count them in your head, let them fill the space, and give that silence a chance to help the individual communicate and engage with you. And then follow that up with, what would it take to make your work more engaging right now? Take notes, figure it out, and kind of go from there. What we know is that the last thing you have to do is you have to take visible action. Address the one thing that they shared or the 2 things they shared, and send the brief message on Friday that says, based on our conversation, I did this. Is this the step in the right direction? This isn't theoretical. It's tactical. The most important and the most powerful part is that it costs you nothing but your attention and requires no permission from above. You can start tomorrow without any new systems or new approvals. So I'd say try it this week. As you continue to try things, I want you to think about how they scale in an organization. Trust-built transparency can scale and help you in 3 primary areas: performance management, decision communication, and cultural alignment. What we know is that when leaders learn to provide context instead of just criticism, teams stop hiding problems and start solving them, so performance conversations are easier. What we know is that when leaders stop announcing and start explaining, context replaces confusion, and teams understand how their work connects to the outcomes of the organization. And what we also know is your values, when you demonstrate them, become verifiable. People bring problems to meetings instead of taking them to LinkedIn. How do you figure it out? Well, we talked about 3 early warning signs, but here's 3 questions that can help you reveal whether you're funding a ghost workforce you can't even see. The first diagnostic question is, when was the last time your leadership team accurately predicted an employee departure? Not the obvious ones who are telling you they're interviewing, but I'm talking about the high performers who went from engaged to their office is empty overnight. If your leaders can't spot these signals, well, then we're probably losing people. Second diagnostic is, think about your last 3 team meetings. Did anyone raise an uncomfortable truth about engagement, about burnout, about the disconnect between values and actions? If these conversations aren't happening in meetings, they're happening somewhere in Slack. So you've got to find a way to be able to get in front of it. The third diagnostic question is this: how do you measure the gap between what your organization says its values and what it actually rewards? We know if you answered no to any of these questions, that ultimately, well, you're probably funding a ghost workforce, and we don't want that. If you want to make a change with that, contact us more, because you can run the leadership cost calculator on Authentara.com, and you can join us for our upcoming Authentic Leader Certification Sprint. It's founder-led, and it works on the capabilities that allow your authentic leaders to hone that environment where employees want to participate. We started today with a sobering reality: $2.88 million ghost workforce bleeding your organization while sitting in your meetings. We've broken down how good people stop caring. We've shown you how trust transparency, one of our 4 attributes, can serve as an antidote. And we know now that the moment of truth is upon us. The quantum workforce era doesn't tolerate performance theater anymore. Like the editor's song Ghost, where presence without engagement creates a haunting absence, your teams can be physically present while emotionally gone. 72% of your employees can detect leadership inauthenticity within 3 interactions. You're standing at a leadership crossroads with 3 options. Option 1, keep funding your own disengagement crisis. Continue the same surveys, the same fake town halls, that information really never surfaces. Keep looking at the same metrics that tell you everything is good, and your ghost workforce will grow. Option 2, apply surface treatments to systemic problems. Get better snacks, have casual Fridays, have them work from home more flexible. Well, all those are important, but they ignore the fundamental disconnect between what you say matters and what you actions actually prove. And then there's option 3, build trust, build transparency into your leadership architecture, not as a training event, but as a key to your operating system. Create conditions where people choose to engage because their truth is valued. This is what we know. This week, please take the time to run the leadership cost calculator on our website. This month, join our certification. Help your leaders develop that authentic leadership that keeps people there. And then what I want to say is every day this week, find a way to lead with courage, be consistent, build trust, because it's not just one thing. It's the daily choices that align, that tell our employees that we are working with them and for them. I want to say thank you, everybody, for being here this week. I want to say thank you so much for giving us a chance to be able to talk to you about the problems of inauthentic leadership and the toxic boss costs. Please join us next week for our next conversations around productivity loss. Until then, keep leading authentically. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being real. You know why? Because today is the day.